Welcome to toy-polloi.
Hello and welcome to another video from toy-polloi, and in today's video we are going to be fixing another of those very common issues on vintage Generation 1 Transformers, and that is the cassette door mechanism on this Autobot blaster. Now here's a figure I've wanted back in my collection for a long time, and I very happily found this on Lawrence Toy Planet UK stall at the last toy fair, so I grabbed it knowing that it would have this issue, because pretty much every blaster you see has this issue. There's a few buttons on the front which you're supposed to be able to press, and the door opens so that you can put a cassette in. That doesn't work on this one, so we need to take this apart and see what's wrong with it and see if we can fix it. So let's get on with the project. So here we have this Generation 1 Blaster, and he's a pretty cool figure because he turns from a sort of a cassette beatbox into a robot, and he's one that I used to have in my collection but many years ago sold, so I've wanted to get one again for a very long time, but I know they always have this issue. The idea is you can press some of these buttons on the front, I can't remember which one actually, but you press the button and the cassette door should open so you can put a cassette inside it, but as you can see on this one it is completely seized up, so we need to take it apart and see what's gone wrong with it. I also want to fix this Autobot logo, which you can see is very worn, so I'm going to remove that. He does also have a very floppy head, so while we've got him apart we can fix that as well. Otherwise it's a pretty nice figure, so let's fix these issues and see if we can get him sort of back to a transformable and working state. To open him up we just got to flip him over, and there are 5 screws on the back. We can remove those, and then his arms and his legs should just sort of come away, and then we're left with the mechanism in the middle. So let's get him open and see what's gone wrong with this mechanism. With the back open we can now see how the mechanism is supposed to work, and it's fairly complicated, and that's probably why it doesn't ever work particularly well. There's just so many moving parts. When you press this left hand button here, it's supposed to push this little sort of peg into this mechanism, which is a sort of a black piece that moves left and right, and that then pushes on this post here, which is a spring-loaded post, and that unlocks the door. Actually, if I just move this up like so, you can get the door mechanism open. So that is now open, and that is pushed forwards by a spring on the back. But what's happening is this part of the mechanism is just completely sort of locked up. It won't budge at all. You're supposed to be able to move that quite freely. Even if I take this little mechanism piece out here, it's incredibly hard to move. So let's just take that out. You can see there's a spring in there as well, so just remove that. It should be that I can push that button on the front, which I can't even move that button. The button itself is very stiff, and it's supposed to move this little piece to the right there like that. So let's take that piece out and see if that button moves freely on its own. Do you know what? It barely does. It's incredibly stiff. That's rubbing on something. So we need to sort out what that is rubbing on. We then have the other 2 buttons on the other side, which you're supposed to be able to press down as well. And again, those are just incredibly stiff. They just don't want to move. So everything is rubbing together. So let's take that little spring out as well. Put that to one side. And then we have this black piece here, which should sort of slide left to the other side, to the left. A small black piece there. And then you can see we've got the buttons. Yeah, and those are just, they're really stiff without any springs or anything in place. They are really stiff. So let's take this black portion out here and see what that is. There you can see there are the 3 buttons, and the spring that makes these sort of move is this sort of a strange little E-shaped piece here. So if I push on these now, those are all actually fairly loose, so I think they must be rubbing on this piece here. Let's put that back in and see how it sort of works with just that in place. Oh yeah, that is incredibly stiff there. So it looks to me like all of these buttons are rubbing on this black piece, so I think we're going to have to do a little bit of modification to them and see if we can get them to stop rubbing so they actually move freely before we get to any of the other mechanisms. So let's do a little bit of sanding and fine-tuning and see what we can do. So let's start with the one that's supposed to open the cassette front, which is that right hand one, which is really stiff. So let's take that out. again and see what it's rubbing on. I actually think it's rubbing on the left-hand edge there, so we can either sand that down or sand the peg down. I think I'll sand this down just because it's easier. So I'm going to get a needle file out and just file off a little bit of that so there's a little bit more of a gap, and then it shouldn't rub so much. Okay, so I've just filed a little bit off the edge of that. We can do a quick test and see if this is any easier to move. So I'm going to put the back on. I've left most of the mechanism out. This is just to test how easy these buttons move now. So yeah, you can see those are moving a bit freer actually. It's just sort of bits of plastic rubbing on other bits of plastic. This has sort of been over-engineered, I'd say. It's a very complicated system and is made out of fairly cheap plastic. So as this has aged, yeah, it's starting to stiffen up. But yeah, that actually seems to have freed those buttons up. They are moving and they are springing back to where they should be. So we can now go on to the next part of the mechanism and see if we can get that working. But yeah, that does appear to be moving now.
Toy-polloi, that is incorrect. Try again.
Now that we know the buttons are moving, we can move on to the mechanism that unlocks this front cover, the cassette cover, and it's this piece here. Basically what happens is when you press the button down, you've got this triangular piece on the back of the button which moves upwards, and that should then push this black piece to the right, just sort of only a small distance. It's like 5mm, and then that moves this piece, which is spring loaded. There's a spring there which I'll put back in a minute. That moves this piece up and down. Now this up and down piece moves fairly freely. I've put it in with just the spring and you can move it really quite easily. It's this piece here that is sticking. It's just really sort of tight on the plastic. So I think what we're going to have to do for that is just add some lubrication to it, and for that I'm just going to use some Vaseline. It's cheap and easy to get. Some people say that you should use silicone based lubricants, but I find Vaseline works just as well. So I'm going to get a small amount of Vaseline. I'm going to liberally put it on the back of this piece here, so that when we put the two bits of plastic together there'll be some lubrication and everything should move a lot freer, and I think that will fix this. It may be we need to lessen the spring on it as well, but I have a feeling that this will just do the job, because it just feels it's like it's this piece that's moving left and right which sort of is getting stuck. You can really feel that it just doesn't want to move. Even then it's not moving great. It's catching on the bottom. Yeah, why is that catching? Maybe the bottom edge of this piece of plastic needs a bit of sort of fine tuning as well. Maybe there's some sort of plastic pips or something on there. Oh yeah, there's actually a few bits of sort of plastic sticking out the bottom where it's been moulded. So I'm just going to carefully file those off just to smooth the surface down. Then we'll put a bit more Vaseline on and see if the mechanism works. But yeah, it's just little rough edges rubbing together that's causing the issue. So a bit more Vaseline on that. I'm going to put some on that edge as well where I've just filed it down. Put that in there, see how that moves. Oh, that's lovely. Much better, much freer. So let's put the actual mechanism that locks the door in place back together. So it's this piece here, and you have one spring. You've got this little piece at the top, which is what latches onto the door, and the spring goes in the bottom section. You've just got to push that in, and then push it down so it's slightly sprung loaded, like so. And then we can drop this in here. And I'm going to put the back on, and we'll see if this actually works. But I can feel that's already moving a lot freer. So let's put the back on, just to hold everything in place and see if this works. Look at that. Straight away, that is working. Yeah, it's just bits of plastic rubbing together. So a little bit of Vaseline just to add some sort of lubrication to it, and then filing the bottom of that piece so it's flat. It just had a few burrs. I'm guessing where it's made out of cheap plastic and it's cut off sprues essentially, you've got little sort of pips of those sprues left, and that is what's rubbing. So filing those smooth, yeah, that is already working a lot better. So let's go on to the next part of the mechanism. This second mechanism, I think we can sort of go through the same steps that we went with the first one. Just check that the edges don't have any sort of bits of plastic sticking out on them, which on this one it doesn't, so there's nothing rubbing on that. So I think what we can do is just add a little bit of the Vaseline onto the back of it, just to make sure that it is moving freely. Don't need a huge amount. And then we can drop that back in place there. And then you can see there's this little gap, and that's where the spring goes. So we have to push that spring in sort of carefully so it doesn't spring out, like so. And then that should move back and forwards quite freely, which it does. So I think the actual sort of thing that was causing all the issues was this piece here. It was just getting locked in place because it had some burrs on the bottom of it. It just wasn't moving freely. So I'm going to put the basic part of this toy back together, then we can test everything. And then before we put it back together fully, I will fix the loose head. So let's just put that together, put a couple of screws in so that it's easy to use, and then we'll test the mechanism, see what happens. Right, so there you go, that's the blaster's body just screwed back together so we can test this. So if I press these two buttons here, the front should open, which it does. Let's put a cassette in. It's a Decepticons cassette, just because I have one here. We can close that up and that locks in place, which it does. So press the button again and it opens. That's pretty good. And then this sort of is like a play record button. So if you press that, it should go down, lock in place, and then when you press these two, this should then flip up. It doesn't do anything more than that. So let's check that that works. Yeah, it does flip up. It's a little bit stiff still, that one, but it's not a sort of key part of the mechanism. So maybe I need to do a little bit more work on that one, just a little bit more lubrication, a bit more Vaseline around it. But yeah, otherwise that is actually working. It's not the greatest of mechanisms. It's one of those ones, I think it's just been over-designed. And the one on Soundwave is much easier to just press a button on the front and it sort of flips open. Having these buttons that move individually, yeah, it's just adding that extra issue. But yeah, it is working. So I press that down. If I press the one in the middle, that should unlock and move back up to the top, which it does. And then press those two and it will open. Yeah, still a bit stiff, but it's certainly working a whole lot better. So let's take this back apart. I'm going to add a little bit more Vaseline to that, and then we can sort out the loose head while we're in there. Now with the loose head, it fits in this little gap on the back here, and there's a couple of sort of matching prongs on the front. And basically what happens over the years is that the sort of constant movement of the head back and forth has worn this a little bit away, and likewise on the front. So we need to make it a little bit thicker again. Now you could put a bit of super glue on that, which I know a lot of people do. I prefer not to use super glue if I can. So another really easy option is just to get some sellotape. So what I've done is I've stuck a bit of sellotape here, and then I've stuck a couple of other bits of sellotape on top of it. So it's about 3 sort of thicknesses of sellotape. I'm then going to cut a small piece of that out, which I've already done. So I should get my knife under here. I should be able to just sort of pull out a small piece of sellotape, which is 3 layers thick. And I can then just stick this where it's needed to sort of add that extra bit of friction, which is just there. And the reason I like sellotape is because it's a non-permanent repair. If I ever want to come back and take this off, I can. If you do super glue, obviously that is stuck for good. So a bit of sellotape means that you can actually sort of take this off and remove it if you want to change it in future, or if you come up with a better fix in future. So I'm just going to stick that piece there. That just adds an extra little bit of thickness, as I say. So when we put the head back in and the neck joint, it's just that little bit stiffer. So when we move the head, it should now stay in place. So we can go ahead now and put the rest of this figure back together, which is just a case of reversing what we did to take it apart. So this is the front. So first parts are his legs, and you can see that they've got this sort of little clip section which goes either side of that post, and they have to go in a correct order. So we put the well, his right leg in first, and then the left leg, because you can see that they sort of overlap like that. So we'll put the right leg in first, clip that in place. Then we put the left leg in, clip that in place. Then we can grab his arms, and those just fit under this little black bar here. So we can just drop that in like so. Do both sides. Then I've already put the head on the back part of the body, so we can just turn this over, line everything up, and then screw it together and see if he works. Right, here's all back together now, so let's test the head. So this should now stay in place which it does. That's worked really nicely. As I say, there are sort of many ways to do that, but I prefer the sort of permanent fix, and just a bit of sellotape like that really does add just the added friction, which is all you need to make the head stay in place. And we can now test the mechanism at the front. So I've added a little bit more lubrication to this button. So that one, when you push it down, it should just sort of lock in place. Press the middle one and then it sort of unclicks, which is doing much better now. And then we press both of these and that should open the front section, and we can put a cassette in like so, and then shut it up, and then press it again, it should unlock. So yeah, that's all working really nicely. The last thing I want to do, just to make this blaster look really nice for display, is replace that one sticker. All the other stickers are a little bit worn, but I'm happy with that. This one though is really sort of hardly there at all. So I've been into my collection of replacement stickers, and I have these sheets from Toy Hacks, and there's a nice big Autobot logo there which will fit nicely. So I'm just going to remove that bit of lighter fluid and a tissue, and I should be able to remove the old residue. We'll put the new sticker on, and then we'll class Blaster as done. And there we go, that is it for this project. I've got Blaster back up and working. His tape door and all the buttons now actually work, and his head will stay in place. So I can put this back on display with the rest of my Transformers. There are loads of issues like this with the vintage Generation 1 Transformers. So if you know of one in particular that you would like me to cover on the channel, then please leave a comment below. I'm trying to work my way through all of these common issues with G1 Transformers, because they're actually quite fun to work out how and why they're not working. And as you can see with Blaster, the mechanism is actually quite complicated, but it just needs a little bit of fine tuning and you can get it working again. So hopefully this video has been of interest to you. If it has, then make sure to hit the subscribe button and tap the bell to be notified each time I upload a new video. And if you've really enjoyed it, then why not think about becoming a Patreon or YouTube channel member. You get early access to all of my restoration videos, and also access to an exclusive series called On the Cutting Mat. So have a think about that, and thanks for watching.
Thanks for watching Toy-Polloi. Subscribe for more great videos.